entrepreneurial, leadership, intellectual. This is the Cultural Connections Podcast.
I am the producer and the host of the Cultural Connections Podcast. We are having some unfortunate technical difficulties this evening with our live, so we are actually not on the Cultural Connections Facebook page. We're on my personal Facebook page here. So if you are seeing this, it is also going to be transferred over there following the live broadcast. But that said, we always still do take questions. If you're seeing this and you have a question for our guest this evening, please feel free to comment below, and we'll, of course, be sure to answer your question. Tonight on the podcast, we are going to be we have a familiar guest on the podcast, someone who's been on now, I think this is his third time with us. And we're going to be doing a City of Newton, Massachusetts update, something I like to do from time to time. That's where we broadcast. And tonight on the podcast, I'm joined by Tarik Lucas, City Councilor at large from Ward 2 in Newton, Massachusetts here. Thank you again for coming back and joining me tonight.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. It's good to be back on the Cultural Connections podcast, and let's do this.
Great. Well, it's never quiet in Newton, as we like to say here. There's always something that appears to be going on. I think most recently, and I think a lot of people probably heard about this one, and that was some little strike that had happened in Newton, known as a Newton teacher strike, that went on for quite some time and disrupted the lives of many of parents and caregivers in the city of Newton for a little over 2 weeks. I think obviously, as people know, the strike is over, a deal has been reached, but there still has been a lot of repercussions on how people are feeling in the city about this. From your point of view, what has been going on since all of this now has, I guess you could say, settled down?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm very glad that the teachers union received a fair contract. I am a union man myself. I've been a 15-year member of the Harvard University of Clerical and Technical Workers. And we've been through tough contract negotiations, and I'm very glad that I'm in a labor union, but I'm also just as glad that our leaders in the union were able to negotiate a fair contract for its members. And I'm very glad that the leadership of the Newton Teachers Association were able to negotiate a fair contract for their members. But it came at a cost, and it came at the cost of a strike. And, you know, as a legislator, I take an oath of office. And one of those oaths is a state oath, and that is upholding the state constitution and its laws. And as we all know now, that public sector unions are illegal according to Massachusetts state law. And that really divided the community, where if you were for the teachers or you were for following the law or for the administration, it really divided the city. And as a city councilor, I did not want to see that happen. 22 of the 24 city councilors did write a letter to the Newton Teachers Association on the eve, or I think the morning of the strike vote. And we urged them not to go on strike because, well, the primary reason is that it was going to most adversely affect the students who had missed a lot of school in-person instruction due to the pandemic, and now they're going to be out of school for an indefinite point an indefinite length of time, which turned out to be 11 days. And certainly had it's still having an effect on the Newton public school system.
Absolutely. And obviously, I mean, we know the repercussions from that this week. We're recording this on Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. And one of the repercussions of this 11-day strike was the elimination of the February vacation, as to my understanding, there was still some controversialness over that from parents because the fact that they had already planned vacations for the week, they had already, planned things out. So it was known that there was going to be this high absentee rate this week between teachers and students alike. But there was still the concern because it really wasn't, I don't know if it was ever adequately addressed on whether students were going to be penalized this week for missing school. And I know a lot of parents had that as a concern. Was there anything formally addressed to that students wouldn't be penalized for missing classes this week?
That is between the schools and the students or families
Yeah.
of the students. If they're going to be penalized, I hope they're not going to be penalized.
Right.
I think we need to be fair. And also we also have to remember that students are required to have 180 days of school in a year. So that is why February vacation, it's not Monday, but it's Tuesday through Friday.
Right.
This was February break was vacationed and students are in school. However, the Boston Globe had an article out today. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it,
No.
but in the article it said that 31% of NPS students were absent. And
Wow.
just as a point of reference, normally it's only 6% of students are absent in a given
Right.
day. So this is, yeah, a lot of
Now,
parents.
I didn't see the article. Do we know if that 31% absentee rate was just in one day, or was that, obviously I can't imagine they would have data that would be for today as well. I would guess it'd be similar, but
It was, yeah, the date was for Tuesday this week, so yesterday.
okay.
31% were absent. So,
Wow.
they're probably going to be absent those 30% most of the week. So, that's about a third. The school, on
Absolutely.
average, each school is a third empty. So,
Right. No, it is understandable. Given the circumstance, so it does understandably make sense. But these are things that happen. The other situation, obviously, and if that had occurred, was that following the teachers' strike, there were a group of, well, besides the fact that the Teachers Association is required, I think the figure I saw was somewhere around $625,000 that they're required to pay back for the illegal strike that they had. But there was also a group of parents who had filed a lawsuit with the Teachers Association. And to my understanding, you brought me up to speed right before the podcast that the judge denied their lawsuit. Can you bring everyone else up to speed besides me on that?
I will bring you up to speed and everyone else up to speed, and I have a breaking announcement which you have not heard.
Oh,
So yes, a group of parents filed a lawsuit against the Newton Teachers Association and the National Education Association
oh,
and the Massachusetts Teachers Association. That lawsuit was denied by the judge. That judge threw it out.
mhm,
Literally right before we went live, I got
yeah.
an email saying, however, the same group of parents has filed a new class action lawsuit against the NTA, MTA, and the National Education Association. They are estimating damages to be in the excess of $25 million. That just came out, maybe 10 minutes ago.
$25 million. But so,
$25 million.
oh my goodness. Wow. Okay, but what was the figure they were suing? They were not suing for that much. Were they suing for as much before?
I don't know. I am not party to that
Yeah,
lawsuit. I do my absolute best to stay out of the courts.
right, of course.
As do most people.
Right.
But I don't know what they were asking for in their first lawsuits, but this one is for
Oh,
25 million, and it's in with the courts, so we'll see what the courts have to say.
wow.
And just with going back to the fine for the Newton Teachers Association was $625,000.
Yeah.
And this says here, the court elected to divert 275,000 to be payable to the Newton Public Schools, with the remaining 350,000 due to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So
Wow.
it's all just coming out now. But it's about half and half to the state, half to the city.
Yes.
But the strike is over. Um,
Yes.
and now comes the healing portion, and
Right.
it's gonna take a long time to heal.
Right.
Just because now we have the second lawsuit, and we'll see what the courts have to say. And then
Absolutely.
then there's the healing, and the healing is going to take a long time. Um,
Absolutely. No, you nailed it right there when it comes to healing. I think from everything that I have read and from what I have seen, I think the big thing that I think a lot of between not just parents and caregivers, but I think residents alike in this city, because there's so much divide, is restoring that faith in the leadership in this city too. I know, unfortunately, a lot of people who were very critical of the mayor, Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller's role in these discussions, and how that all unfolded. Uh, I mean, and that did have some controversial parts to it in itself. To my understanding, at least one of those nights, the mayor did sit down for discussions with the school committee and the Newton Teachers Association, but apparently it was not for at least for some of those people. Some people, it was not enough that she did, but where there was a lot of back and forth on that. So I guess the big thing is, in your own opinion, how do we bring the city back together and restore faith in our leadership in the city here?
mhm. Well, I just want to talk about Mayor Fuller
Yeah.
briefly, just because you mentioned her name.
Yeah.
The mayor was present at the very end when they were at the finish line, but the mayor was always in close communication with the school committee and their chair, Chris Bresky, and Dr. Anna Nolan, who's the Newton School Superintendent. I think a week before the strike ended, I was in a meeting with Mayor Fuller in
Mhm.
her office. And it was in the evening, and that was at the same time when the school committee was meeting with the NTA. And I think maybe on 5 different occasions, her cell phone rang, and it was school committee chair Chris Bresky calling
Mhm.
her up. She had to leave our meeting to take that phone call. So that
Right.
just tells you that she was always in close
Of course.
communication. We have phones, we have email, there's video conferencing like we're on now. So, I mean, even though she wasn't there in person, she was there in person. And
Absolutely.
she was getting up to second updates on the negotiations. And just the second thing that you said, how do we heal?
Mhm.
I said this last week when I was on a local TV show, and that is, time heals all wounds. It's just going to take time,
Yep.
and it's also going to take the people also must talk, engage, and listen and interact with those who you disagree with.
Right.
uh, I mean, we all want the same thing. We all love our teachers, and we all love the Newton Public Schools. We want to see our students we want to see our students achieve well in the classroom.
Of
And
course.
those are our values as a community. But I think the adults, us, the leaders
Yes.
of the city, need to interact and still engage with those who we disagreed with during the strike.
Absolutely.
That has to happen. We can't go into our own corners and expect everything to get better. No, we all have to go to the middle and understand our differences.
Absolutely. And my one last question in regards to this topic, and then we'll move on to other topics, is that during the strike, I forget which day it was, but there was one of the rallies that the Teachers Association had at City Hall. there was a video that had surfaced from one of the the local news organizations of some of the teachers gathering going into City Hall and asking very politely, from what it looked like, to speak with the mayor. Obviously, understandably, she's a busy person during the day, obviously. But it did obviously lead to those teachers being upset that the police are blocking her door. They wouldn't allow, she wouldn't allow them to speak to her even just for a few minutes. In your own opinion there, do you think that could have been prevented like that, or what are your own thoughts on that?
Yeah, the mayor is, as I say, is the city's chief executive officer. I
Yeah.
mean, she has many departments working under her, the biggest one being the school department.
Right.
And that particular department's employees were on strike. So that takes up a lot of time, but there are still other needs and responsibility that the mayor has to fulfill during the day. Yes, the teachers did go up the stairs to her office in City Hall during the strike, and they wanted to meet with her. Um, I thought that would have been inappropriate
Mhm.
uh, for her to meet with the teacher simply because the contract negotiations were going on. The school committee was not there. The lawyer for the school committee was not there. The superintendent was not there.
Right.
So it would have been an unproductive, in my opinion, an unproductive session with the mayor.
Yeah.
If you wanted to meet with the mayor, and talk about the strike, I would say that for those teachers, go through your union leadership and schedule a meeting. But again, the contract negotiations were going on, so that would have been wholly inappropriate. The police were there. They did not let they did not let them go inside her office. And the police, doing their jobs very well, did respectfully ask them to leave once the mayor decided she wasn't going to meet with them.
Absolutely. Okay, no, that I totally agree. I understand. I hear what you're saying. I think that's just one of the many things here going on around the city, and with everything going on. Before we go any further, I do want to remind those watching from home right now that this is the Cultural Connections podcast. We're live on Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. We're joined by Tarik Lucas, City Councilor at Large from Ward 2, giving you a Newton, Massachusetts update with all things Newton. If you have a question that you would like to ask, please feel free to comment below, and we'll be sure to answer your question live. Our next topic that we're going to move forward to is the MBTA communities stuff going on right now. And recently, is it the city of Milton, or is it the
Town.
town of Milton? Had rejected a vote for the MBTA Communities Act. Can you bring us up to speed on that and what the repercussions to Newton could be for them rejecting that?
Yep. The Newton, excuse me, said Newton. Oh my gosh. The town of Milton, town meeting last year in December approved their MBTA zoning.
Mhm.
And because they are a rapid transit community, meaning they have a trolley or a green line, red line, orange line, they have a trolley.
Mhm.
But that puts them at 25%. They have to zone to increase their housing stock 25% of their 2020 housing unit number. And the town meeting overwhelmingly, I think maybe around 35% voted in favor of adopting the zoning. Then a bunch of residents who were well organized collected signatures and they forced a referendum on the zoning. There was an election last week on Tuesday, and the voters of Milton overturned the town meeting,
Hmm.
meaning the zoning is essentially null and void.
Right.
They don't have the MBTA zoning in place,
Mhm.
and the deadline for that for Milton, because they were rapid transit, was 12/31 of last year.
I see.
So they overturned it, and I think the vote was 54% opposed, 46% in
Hmm.
favor. So
Yeah.
a comfortable
Yeah.
victory, considering that the governor, lieutenant governor, the attorney general, and probably multiple state agencies encouraged the voters of Milton to vote yes,
Right.
but they did not follow their advice and they voted no. They overturned the zoning. And just today, an announcement came out from the, I guess, from the state, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, and they are going to deny or they are not eligible to receive a MassWorks and Housing Works grant or a recent grant award for $140,800. And
Wow.
that was going for a seawall and access improvements, according to the Boston Globe. So they are out $140 in a state grant right now. And just to make sure everyone is aware of the 140,000, is that a lot? Is that a little?
Yeah.
Uh, I think I looked this up yesterday, and Milton's operating budget for next fiscal year was somewhere around 130 or 135 million dollars.
Hmm.
So you get a sense of how much that was. So
Absolutely.
I think that makes it I mean it's less than 1%. So
Right.
um,
Of course.
but I don't know if there's going to be any more
Hmm.
any more any further punishment. That we'll have to wait and see. But this is again, like with the teacher strike, this is an opportunity.
Right.
This is an opportunity for the state to work with the leaders of Milton and the No campaign.
Right.
Clearly, they are a powerful force in Milton now. Work with them to get them into compliance because it is the law. And if they have to, potentially work with them and negotiate with them
Hmm.
on that 25%,
Yep.
maybe bring it down to 15%,
Yeah.
because the reason why I say this, because I said before they're a rapid transit community, but they
Right.
have very how do you say, a very small trolley line on the edge of town, and that counts them as rapid transit. And that
Right.
trolley only goes to Mattapan. It doesn't go into, the Back Bay or Fenway Park
Right.
or South Station. It just
Uh-huh.
takes that trolley takes you into Mattapan, which is on the
Mm.
edge of Boston anyways. So it's not like they have a green line or a red line going through Milton. So I think this is an opportunity for the state to negotiate with the No campaign and the leaders of Milton, and maybe bring it down to 15%. And they can
Hmm.
come up with a plan that's 15% as opposed to 25%. And
Right.
they comply because it is the law.
Of course. No, I mean, so in that case, then because they voted no, what is the repercussions for Newton on them voting then down on this?
Well, excuse me, Newton,
Yes.
we approved our zoning last December.
Right.
Zoning is probably zoning is and probably will be for the foreseeable future the most controversial issue in Newton. Zoning,
Mhm.
absolutely. People really get into their corners when it comes to zoning. And what the city council did was we met in the middle. We all came towards the middle and we negotiated on what we would approve because we didn't want to see a referendum. We wanted to comply with the law. So we met in the middle. And I think we might have been at maybe 27 or 28% when our requirement was 25%. So I am very glad that Newton complied with its zoning. Our application is pending right now at the state level.
Mhm.
And, we are confident that they will approve it. And then we will be in compliance, and then we can put the whole zoning, village center zoning, hopefully residential zoning to bed, because it is a third rail.
Oh,
And, as you know, we had an election in November, and there were three incumbents were voted out who were very supportive of the MBTA zoning.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a very controversial issue to talk about zoning in Newton, and it always will be, but I'm very glad that we compromised, we met in the middle, and we got something done because we worked together. And that's ultimately what government is all about, people working together to solve our problems.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree further. I just want to again remind our viewers that are just tuning in with us one more time here that this is the Cultural Connections podcast. We are live on Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. We're joined by Tarik Lucas, City Councilor at Large 2 from Newton, Massachusetts, and we're talking all things Newton, Massachusetts. Let's move forward here then and talk about a little bit more in terms of development around Newton. There seems to be a lot in that area that keeps popping up from place to place, and I think some of these developments have sparked a little bit more controversialness than others. We had talked before, I think, was it about the Washington Square area? Is that before the podcast? Is that where you had mentioned that there were
Washington Street.
Washington Street? Thank you.
Washington Square is in Brookline in New York City. I don't think we
Washington
want to
Street.
talk about that. Yeah. The Washington Street pilot. Yeah.
Bring us up to speed on the pilot with Washington Street and where
Yeah.
things stand on that.
Yeah. So it's a pilot, but we're not talking about airplanes and captains. So it's not like that.
Right.
So the Washington Street pilot, well, it's a trial, it's a test, it's a pilot, and the administration is proposing a road diet on Washington Street from the corner of Lowell Ave and Washington Street in Newtonville all the way to the intersection of Chestnut Street and Washington Street in West Newton. It's about a mile in length.
Mhm.
And right now it is a total of 4 travel lanes, 2 in each direction. The pilot will reduce the number of through lanes from 4 to 2. So you'll have 1 lane going in each direction. That is essentially what the pilot is, and the pilot could last up to 10 years.
Yeah. Okay. And with this pilot, what does the city hope to gain from the pilot? What do we hope to gain from it?
Well, I think there's many reasons why the city is doing it, and there's many goals. One of them is to make it safer for cars traveling. If you ever make a left turn out of that Trader Joe's, or you have to make a left turn onto one of those streets that run adjacent to Washington Street, it is dangerous. So that's one thing, is to make it safer for cars. They also want to make it safer for pedestrians. They want to make it safer for bikes. They want to make it safer for everyone. And you can do that by reducing the number of lanes, which would, in theory, reduce the speed and make it safer to cross Washington Street if you have to.
Right.
Then safer to drive. And they're going to put up some planters. They're going to put up a screen on the fence that abuts the Mass Pike. So it's also to beautify that section of Washington Street, which everyone would agree is an eyesore.
Absolutely.
So there's many benefits to doing the pilot, and I just want to get everyone up to speed, because this was not even 24 hours ago. The city council approved the pilot last night. We had about a maybe 30 to 45 minute debate or conversation. And ultimately it was approved, and their construction isn't expected to begin until 2025. So they're going to spend the rest of this year studying the roadway. We have a concept. We have a concept of what we are going to do. We have to work out the details, the metrics. Where do we want to go from 2 lanes to 1 lane? How much time, or distance do you need to bring it down to 1 lane? And there's many things that are going to be involved: flex posts, bump outs, temporary curbs, paint, signs. I mean, it's temporary construction, not permanent construction. We're not changing the infrastructure. We're not moving earth or putting in
Right.
anything permanent. So it's going to last for up to 10 years, and they're going to try out new things as they go along. So, I think a lot of people, we've received a lot of emails, most of them in support, and then we did get some who were opposed to it. And just so, oh yeah, this is also being funded with ARPA money. Those are federal dollars, American Rescue Plan Act dollars,
Uh-huh.
and it's essentially COVID money,
Right.
COVID dollars from the pandemic. And I ultimately voted against the pilot. Not that I don't believe in not that I don't believe in the goals,
Hmm.
but I didn't like the funding source for it. I felt as though that the ARPA funds should have been used for other purposes, like schools, helping out low-income families, small
Hmm.
businesses and restaurants, um, you know, things like that. And
Right.
ultimately, the city went in a different direction. I think we could have done more in other projects, such as affordable housing too.
Hmm.
So that's my reason for voting against it. But now that it's approved, I do want it to um, succeed, and I think it will.
Hmm.
So we're just going to have to hold the Public Works and Planning Department's feet to the fire to make sure we get something that's good for the residents of Newton.
Absolutely. I think that's important too. I think one of the last few things that we'll touch upon on the podcast this evening is really just bringing people up to speed on, there are so many, as I mentioned before, different developments that are and projects that are going on throughout the city. We obviously, I think one of the ones that most people or should be aware about is the new senior center project that is taking place. And along with the fact now that because of the debt exclusion vote that had passed, we're watching the schools, I believe both the Franklin School now and the Countryside Schools starting to have their projects starting to take shape. Can you bring us up to speed on some of these projects?
Yeah, so we're talking about Newtonville and the old Prescott Library, also known as the Newton Senior Center, was demolished this week. I am a preservationist, and I wanted that building to stay. It's a part of Newton's history. I
Mm,
tried to landmark it through the Newton Historical Commission, and that application was denied. I'm disappointed with that, but ultimately I do accept their decision to not landmark it, and the building was torn down this week. New Cal will be here in a couple of years. So we're gonna have to wait and see when the construction finishes, what the project will actually look like. And the other projects you mentioned are the Countryside School and the Franklin School. Yeah, they're having their community meetings right now, discussing, what type of programs and size and scale
mhm.
of these projects. Um, they haven't started the demolition yet, but those buildings need to be replaced, which is one
Yeah.
reason I did support the two debt exclusions, because we do need quality school buildings to recruit and maintain our wonderful teachers. So we'll have to wait and see what those projects are ultimately going to look like.
I believe if I read correctly, they also have started work on the Lincoln Elliott Elementary School. Is that my understanding that correctly?
Yes, that one was already in the queue.
Yep.
And that was not a debt exclusion.
Uh-huh.
But they are working on Lincoln Elliott, and I don't know when exactly that one will be open. But just to put everyone some context here,
Yes.
the Zervis, Cabot, and one more, Anger. Those were approved during the overrides and debt exclusions of 2013, and those schools were ultimately built in the years thereafter. But
Hmm.
going back in time, you would have to go back to the 1960s till Newton built a brand new elementary school.
Right.
And that was, we should have been building schools in the 90s and in the 2000s, but we weren't. And that was a big mistake because now we're playing catch up.
Right.
And I'll give credit to Mayor Warren and Mayor Fuller for getting those projects approved. Those are important, and we do need new school buildings. We also in the it was in the um operating override, the Horace Mann School. There was some
Yeah.
funding for the Horace Mann School because the old operating override failed. A lot of people were concerned, are we going to get a new Horace Mann? But the city found the money. We did move some money around, and we freed up the money so the Horace Mann additions could go through, additions
Right.
and renovations, because that school also needs to be upgraded.
Mm-hmm.
So the schools, they're all over the city, and we are building new ones. We're renovating some of the current ones. And one thing you mentioned Lincoln Elliott. Once the new Lincoln Elliott is open, the former one will be temporary space, swing space is what we call it. So that way, if another school needs to use that space while their new
Right.
school is being built, they can use that building because it can house a lot of students.
And just to add some context here, I'm just trying to figure out what the new Lincoln Elliott is. Where exactly is that being built? Is that being built next? Where are they exactly building that?
That is going to be built on Jackson Road in, I guess you can call that Nonantum section of Newton. So it's just down the street
Down the street. Okay.
From the current one. So it's
That's
right
just
there.
empty land? What was where they're building, or what was?
It's the Aquinas School, I believe.
Oh, okay.
I think it's that one. I always get those school buildings over there a little
Right.
mixed up, but I think it's literally right across the street from the current one, or
Oh.
just down the street. Sorry.
Okay, I think, okay, I have an idea of what you're saying then.
Yeah.
Some of the other development, I mean, other projects I know in the city, one which has been ongoing and I think is expected to be done by this summer is the Gath Pool project, the complete overhaul, which was a big undertaking in the city and was a desperately needed one. Where do things stand on that as well?
Yeah, Gaff Pool will be up in the new Gaff Pool will be
Yes.
up and running this summer. So they'll have a full programming for the students and adults who do use the pool. I'm very excited for that. I think it's a wonderful project and it'll be a wonderful addition to Newton and Newtonville. So that will be that is on schedule as well. So
Fantastic.
and I think most people were in favor of a new Gaff pool because that current one, or the old one, sorry, just wasn't cutting it. It needed
Right.
it needed a new locker room, it needed a new pool. It
Yeah.
was leaking water, so the water had to be replenished, so it was always cold. So yeah, it's just that one I am really looking forward to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I do want, Newton residents to be able to learn how to swim and swim
Right.
well. There's very few universal truths in this world, Brian.
Yeah.
One of them is swimming is the best exercise.
Sure, of course, absolutely. Well, before again, I'm going to say one more time here for those just tuning in live with us that this is the Cultural Connections podcast. We're live on February 21st, 2024. We're talking all things Newton, Massachusetts with returning guest City Councilor Tarik Lucas from Ward 2 at large from Ward 2. I do want to also just touch upon some other development projects in the city that I don't think have been given much attention to, and I don't know if there's any updates to them. One of them being the Northland project on Needham Street, and the other was the Riverside development at the Riverside T Station. Are there any updates to either of those two projects?
There's no new updates to either of those projects. Northland is under construction right now on Needham Street. That is a big development.
Right.
And I think they did have some delays due to, I think, either costs and or supply chains. So one was delayed, but there's still, that if you drive down Needham Street, you'll still see that fence
Right.
up there. and it's a giant hole in the ground, but we knew that was coming because
Right.
it's a large development. It's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
Riverside, that one, I think the one coming, the city has approved, I think, 3 different versions of the Riverside development, and they haven't been built.
Ah,
So, but I do know that that particular developer, which is Mark Development,
right.
they are gonna come back and they are gonna build something completely different than what we approved a couple years ago. It's gonna be done through Chapter 40B,
Mm-hmm.
which is a state law which allows a developer to circumvent local zoning in order to build more housing. The trade-off is that they have to provide more affordable housing. So, but that application has not been filed with the state yet or with the city. So, but eventually that's going to be coming back again and see that Riverside 4.0, it looks like. So
Mm-hmm.
that will be very interesting. So we'll have to wait and see what that one actually looks like, because I have not seen any renderings at all regarding that one, except that it's going to be a 40B. And because the project will be smaller,
Right.
they are not going to build that particular on-ramp from
Oh,
128 lead directly into it, just because it's
right.
smaller and
Right.
their revenues are not going to be as much, so they're not going to pick up the additional costs of building the on-ramp. So that is
That
the one
still
trade-off.
include the former Hotel Indigo site?
Good question. I don't know if the
Mm-hmm.
Hotel Indigo is staying or going. We'll
Mm-hmm.
have to wait and see. Again, I haven't seen any plans, and there's been very little talk about it. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Alrighty. Well, as we reach the end of the podcast here, as we starting to reach towards the end, is there anything else in the city here that's important for people to know about and the things ongoing that you would like to add?
Well, I'll speak on behalf of Newtonville, if you don't mind.
Sure.
We also have another proposed development. As I said before, Riverside is a 40B.
Mm-hmm.
There is a 40B development being proposed on Craft Street next to the city stable. So that is approximately 300 units,
Mm-hmm.
263 parking spaces, and there will be 20% of the 300 will be affordable. That is ongoing right now. There's been one meeting before the Zoning Board of Appeals,
Mm-hmm.
and I've known that site was going to be developed since I first met with the developers back in the summer of 2022. So, this project has changed a lot over the years. Now they're at their permitting stage, so that's something to keep your eyes on going forward.
Absolutely. Good to know. Well, I mean, again, it's great to be caught up to speed with everything going on in Newton, Massachusetts. If you missed any part of this episode or still have a question or comment that you would like answered, either comment below on this post, on this live, on this video here, which will be, again, if it's not already, if you're seeing it, it's the recording that this will be on the Cultural Connections Facebook page. Along with all of our other outlets. But due to some unfortunate technicalities, we were not exactly live on the Cultural Connections Facebook page, but we are live anyhow. But if you do have questions or comments or suggestions for future episodes, please email me directly at brianives@gmail.com. That's BRIANIV as in Victor ES @gmail.com. And again, as I said, if you have future suggestions, send them to me as well. And we hope to see you again. Thank you again to Tarik Lucas for joining me today on the podcast. And we will see you again next time on the Cultural Connections podcast. I'm Brian Ives, and I'm the producer and the host of the Cultural Connections podcast. Thanks for watching.
Thank you again for watching this episode of the Cultural Connections podcast. For more information on today's episode, be sure to check out our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also watch this episode again in its entirety on our YouTube channel. This podcast is also available on listening platforms Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Breaker, Radio Public, and New TV. Thanks again for watching this episode of the Cultural Connections podcast.